G'day, Professor Joseph Drew. In this video, I'll talk about the options that Council's looking at with progressing the whole special rate variation for Port Stephens, and also the effect and the importance of assumptions. So, Council's decided to progress further with this special rate variation, and they've given to you two options to consider. Option one is a 26% increase to your rates for 1 year, and thereafter you just go back to the normal IPAR increase cycle. Now these are both permanent increases though. Option two is that you would get an increase for each of every 3 years of 10.5%. In a cumulative sense, because it's sort of compounded, that comes to around 35%. Now, both options have benefits. Now, obviously people will see option one is a lower tax increase, a lower increase to your rates, and people will be encouraged and enticed by that. But the problem with that is that the macroeconomic uncertainty that we have at present has never been greater. The challenges and the potential things that could go wrong on the downside for local government have never been greater. In option one, you take all your increase in that first year. If year two and year three end up being the worst case scenario, will your council have sufficient funds to deal with that worst case scenario, or will they have to go through this process again? I don't think any of us want to go through this process again. So I prefer option two for that reason. It gives the council flexibility to respond to worst case scenarios. Now this is really important. The next thing I'm going to tell you is SRVs and all rate increases do not have to be passed on in full. And if the council decides not to pass it on in full, they can actually defer it to later on if it becomes necessary. So what does that mean? If you were to go with option two, which is almost 35% in a cumulative sense, and say year two ends up being better than what we hoped, and year three ends up being awesome, that means that the council doesn't have to pass on that whole 10.5% rate increase in year two and year three. They might decide just to pass on 3% or 4% or 5%. So don't go thinking that option two means that your rates will definitely go up by more. What option two means is that we have more flexibility, and if things turn out worse than what we're currently thinking, we won't have to go through this expensive and troublesome process again. I think option two for that reason alone is your best option. So what do you get for your SRV? Well, basically you get to have a financially sustainable council. You get to not leave your children and your grandchildren a whopping great big debt and a whopping great big burden to deal with on top of whatever needs they will have in the future themselves. And for peace of mind, I think it's worth the increase. I heartily wish my council here, which is not financially sustainable, would put in an increase of around 30% to make sure that I'm not leaving a debt and a burden to my children. If you think like me, you will be happy with an SRV simply to clear your conscience and to have a morally defensible, financially sustainable council. You will also not have to suffer reductions in your current service levels, and the council is talking about small enhancements to roads and waterways and buildings as well. So you're not getting some great big goodie or present. You're not paying for anything in particular. You're paying to rectify the shortfall in financial sustainability that Port Stephens has had for quite some time.